The galaxy had spent thousands of years searching for a civilization worthy of inheriting the future. They expected conquerors. They expected geniuses. They expected warriors strong enough to control impossible technology. Instead, the ancient archive opened for a wounded human rescue soldier who had lost almost everything and still refused to leave anyone behind. He was not the strongest being in the room. He was simply the one who remembered why strength existed. Welcome to Intergalactic Untold. We hope you enjoy this story and have a wonderful day filled with happiness. Now, let us begin this journey among the stars. The evacuation beacon was still transmitting when Ethan Walker stopped hearing the alarms. Not because the planet had become quiet. Ellis, 7 was never quiet. The wind continued tearing across the abandoned colony, carrying dust through the broken structures and the remains of a war that had ended 14 years earlier. He stopped hearing the alarms because he had learned which sounds mattered. The reactor failure, the collapsing tunnels, the fading life signs behind him, the things that could still be saved. The continuity archive had been hidden beneath Ellis, 7 for thousands of years. Civilizations had searched for it. Empires had fought over it. They believed it contained technology powerful enough to reshape the galaxy. Seraphina Vale came looking for the same thing. The Valkyrie Dominion had sent her alone because she was known for one thing. She finished missions, no matter the cost. Her shuttle disappeared into the storm clouds above the dead planet, landing 3 miles from the ruins of the old research facility. Her armor adjusted to the thin atmosphere. Her scanners mapped the surface. No active military units. No functioning defense systems. Only one weak biological signal beneath the ground. Human. That should have been impossible. The last Earth expedition to Ellis, 7 had been declared lost 14 years ago. No survivors. No recovery. No explanation. Seraphina followed the signal through the remains of the facility. The deeper she went, the stranger the evidence became. The security systems had not been destroyed by an enemy. They had been manually shut down. Emergency shelters had been opened. Medical supplies had been distributed. Someone had spent the final hours of the expedition helping others escape. Then she found him. Ethan Walker sat beneath a collapsed section of the lower corridor, his damaged armor connected to an old power relay. The left side of his suit was barely functional. His medical system showed multiple injuries. His oxygen reserves were dangerously low. Yet his hands remained steady as he repaired a damaged evacuation beacon. Seraphina raised her weapon. Ethan looked up. His eyes moved from her armor to the blade, then past her shoulder. Not searching for an escape route. Checking if anyone else had followed. "You're Valkyrie," he said. His voice was exhausted, but calm. "You're supposed to be dead," Seraphina replied. Ethan glanced at the beacon. "Not the first time I've heard that." She scanned the area. Then she saw them. 3 injured alien civilians sheltered behind him. Different species. Different biology. All connected to the same emergency beacon. "You stayed behind for them." It was not a question. Ethan continued working. The evacuation route was still open. "Your own condition is critical." "Yeah." He tightened a damaged connection. "So is theirs." Seraphina watched him carefully. She had studied thousands of battlefield reports. Soldiers who stayed behind usually did it for glory. For revenge. For orders. Ethan Walker did none of those things. There was no audience. No commander watching. No victory waiting. Only a broken man completing a task nobody would remember. "You came here for the archive," she said. Ethan looked toward the sealed chamber below. "I came here because my team was sent to keep it from being misused." "You expect me to believe that?" He looked at her. "No, a pause. I expect you to check." The answer irritated her because it was reasonable. The storm outside intensified. The facility shook beneath their feet. Seraphina's scanner detected a massive energy signature below them. The continuity archive. Finally, the discovery every civilization wanted. Ethan looked at the reading and then at the injured survivors. He did not move toward the source of power. He moved toward the evacuation beacon. Seraphina noticed. "You are not curious?" Ethan looked at the ancient technology buried beneath the ruins. "I am." "Then why not go?" His fingers stopped for a moment. A memory crossed his face. Something painful. Something unfinished. "Because curiosity doesn't come before people." The answer was quiet. Almost uncertain. As if he was still arguing with himself about it. Seraphina had expected a hero. She found something else. A soldier who knew his choices had consequences. A human who had lost people because of those choices. A man who did not believe he was always right, but still refused to walk away. Beneath the dead world of Ellis 7, the ancient archive began processing new data. Not strength, not rank, not technology, a pattern of decisions. And for the first time in thousands of years, the system did not search for a civilization that had never failed. It searched for one that had learned what to do after failure. Serafina Vale had spent most of her life believing that the hardest decisions were the ones made quickly. A commander who hesitated created chaos. A warrior who questioned every order endangered everyone around them. The Valkyrie Dominion had taught her that survival depended on discipline, and discipline depended on accepting that some losses were unavoidable. She had believed that, until Ellis 7. The human soldier standing in front of her was proof that another way existed. Ethan Walker did not argue with her. He did not demand trust. He simply continued repairing the evacuation beacon while his own life support system counted down the minutes he had left. "You are under Valkyrie authority," Serafina said. Ethan looked at the damaged transmitter in his hands. "I noticed the armor. Then you understand that this facility is now under my control." He tightened a connection cable and checked the signal strength. "That sounds important." Her eyes narrowed. "Are you mocking me?" "No," he looked at her. "I'm trying to keep the beacon working." The answer was frustrating because it was not disrespectful. It was not rebellion. It was focus. Serafina scanned the equipment around him. Human technology. Outdated compared to Valkyrie standards. Modified repeatedly. Repaired instead of replaced. The marks on the armor told a story. Not of victories. Of survival. "You are not a frontline soldier," she said. Ethan paused. "No, your armor classification says rescue operations." "That's correct." "Then why were you assigned to an archaeological recovery mission?" Ethan looked toward the sealed chamber beneath the facility. "Because it stopped being archaeology when people started dying." The words were simple, but they carried something heavier. Serafina studied him carefully. Most soldiers explained their actions through orders. Ethan explained them through consequences. That difference mattered. She moved past him and examined the emergency records stored inside the facility. The data was damaged, but enough remained. Earth Expedition. Ellis 7 Recovery Operation. Mission Objective, Secure Continuity Archive. Secondary Objective, Assist all surviving personnel. The final reports showed something unusual. The expedition had discovered the archive. Then communication failed. The team had not attempted extraction. They had redirected power to the civilian shelters. They had used their own supplies to keep others alive. "Your mission failed," Serafina said quietly. Ethan did not look away from the beacon. "Yes." The honesty surprised her. She expected justification. Excuses. Instead, he accepted the words. "You admit failure?" "Of course." He checked the oxygen levels of one of the injured alien survivors behind him. People died. The room became still. "Then why continue protecting the mission?" Serafina asked. Ethan looked at her. For the first time, she saw something beneath his calm. Not confidence. Not certainty. Doubt. "Because I still don't know if we made the right decision." The answer caught her off guard. He was not a man convinced of his own righteousness. He was someone carrying the weight of a choice that never stopped hurting. "You lost your team because you stayed." Ethan looked down at his hands. "Some of them." A pause. "Others because I made the call." The Valkyrie remained silent. There it was. The wound he had not shown. Not the injury in his armor. The one beneath it. Ethan had not survived because he was fearless. He survived because he continued moving despite the possibility that he had been wrong. Outside, the storm grew stronger. The facility shook as ancient systems detected the energy source below them. The continuity archive was waking. Serafina looked toward the sealed chamber. Every civilization that had searched for it wanted the same thing. Access. Knowledge. Advantage. Ethan Walker had been here first. He had reached the greatest discovery in the galaxy. And he had spent 14 years making sure nobody touched it. "Why didn't you open it?" she asked. Ethan stared at the ancient door. "Because I didn't know what was behind it. That has never stopped anyone else." "I know." His voice became quieter. That was the problem. The answer stayed with her. The archive was not hidden because it was impossible to find. It was hidden because the wrong people always wanted certainty before understanding. Serafina lowered her weapon slightly. Not because she trusted him. Trust had not been earned yet. But because, for the first time in years, she had encountered someone who carried power differently. Someone who knew the cost of a decision. Someone who feared being wrong more than he feared losing. Beneath the ruins of Ellis 7, the ancient system continued its analysis. Not of a hero, not of a warrior, of a pattern. And somewhere inside the forgotten machinery, a question began forming. Not whether humanity was perfect, but whether a flawed species could learn from its failures before its failures became its end. The chamber beneath Ellis 7 did not open because Ethan Walker was special. It opened because the Continuity Archive had finally collected enough information to begin its evaluation. Serafina Vale noticed the difference immediately. There was no recognition ceremony, no ancient system declaring a chosen individual, no hidden authority passed from one species to another. The old mechanism simply processed data. It observed. It calculated. It compared. The massive door separated from the stone around it with a low vibration, revealing a corridor untouched by the collapse above. Ethan stared into the darkness. Serafina watched him carefully. You knew this would happen. Ethan shook his head. No, then why are you not surprised? He looked at the ancient symbols moving across the walls. Because I expected it to ask questions. That answer made her pause. You believe the archive communicates? No, he stepped forward slowly, favoring his injured leg. I think it collects evidence. The corridor walls illuminated as they passed. Not with images of battles or weapons. With records. Thousands of years of civilization history. Scientific discoveries. Diplomatic failures. Population declines. Environmental collapses. The First Accord had not preserved victories. It had preserved patterns. Serafina activated her translator. Continuity Archive. Explain function. The response came after several seconds. Purpose. Evaluate civilization resilience before knowledge transfer. A new display appeared. 3 categories. Adaptive intelligence. Cooperative stability. Power containment. Serafina studied the final category. Power containment? The system answered. Capability without restraint increases probability of self-termination. The words were simple. The meaning was not. Every civilization she knew measured advancement through capability. Better ships. Stronger weapons. Greater influence. The archive appeared to measure something different. Whether a civilization could possess power without becoming controlled by it. Ethan looked at the display. That explains why nobody opened it. Serafina turned toward him. Why? Because everyone came here asking what they could gain. He looked at the ancient system, not what they could prevent. The statement bothered her because she could not immediately reject it. They reached the central chamber. A crystalline processor floated above a network of dormant machines. No weapons. No defensive platforms. No signs of conquest. It was a repository built by a civilization that feared its own mistakes more than its enemies. Serafina scanned the system. The archive does not identify individuals. Ethan looked at her. No, it evaluates civilizations. Probably. She looked at him. Probably. A faint expression crossed his face. I've been wrong before. The answer was quiet, almost insignificant. But Serafina noticed it. A person seeking power usually protected the image of certainty. Ethan protected the truth instead, even when the truth made him look weaker. The archive activated another layer of data. A simulation appeared above the chamber. Not a prophecy, not a prediction, a probability model. Thousands of civilizations. Different choices, different outcomes. Some collapsed after gaining advanced technology. Some survived by limiting themselves. Some disappeared because they believed efficiency mattered more than cooperation. This is a test, Serafina said. Ethan shook his head. No, she looked at him. Then what? He watched the simulations change. A measurement. The distinction mattered. A test had a correct answer. A measurement only revealed reality. The archive was not asking them to become something else. It was showing them what they already were. A warning signal interrupted the chamber. New information appeared. External vessels approaching Ellis 7. Multiple signatures. Different from Valkyrie technology. Different from human design. Someone else had found them. Serafina prepared her weapon. Ethan looked toward the entrance. How long? 7 minutes before they reached the facility. He nodded. Then we need to move. She noticed something. He did not ask whether they should fight. He did not ask what they could gain from the archive. His first calculation was always the same. What would happen to the people around him? The chamber lights shifted. The archive continued processing their presence. Not their strength. Not their history. their behavior under pressure. For thousands of years, civilizations had searched for a machine that could reveal the future. They had misunderstood what the first accord left behind. It was not a prediction of what a civilization would become. It was a record of what a civilization had already chosen to be. The first signal from the approaching fleet was not a weapon lock. It was a request for communication. Serafina Vale found that almost more concerning. Enemies were predictable. Enemies wanted something obvious. These ships arrived with controlled formations, encrypted identification codes, and the confidence of people who believed their intentions were justified. The continuity archive continued processing behind them. Ancient systems moved quietly through the chamber, collecting data from every interaction. Not judging, measuring. Ethan Walker looked at the incoming signal on the damaged console. They're not here to destroy the facility. Serafina glanced at him. How do you know? Because they sent a message first. She looked toward him. That means nothing. Ethan nodded. Exactly. The answer made her pause. He was not assuming good intentions. He was simply refusing to assume the worst before evidence existed. Minutes later, the underground chamber filled with a holographic transmission. Commander Kale Voss appeared above the interface. Leader of the Meridian Coalition. A civilization known for surviving impossible resource shortages through centralized planning and strict allocation systems. Not conquerors, not saviors, survivors. Valkyrie Serafina Vale, Kale said. You have located the continuity archive. Serafina remained silent. We request access. Ethan looked at the projection. Request is a polite word for something you already decided. Kale's eyes moved toward him. And you must be the human survivor. Recovery specialist. Ethan corrected. Not survivor. The commander studied him. You stayed behind 14 years ago. Yes. Many would call that irrational. Ethan looked at the damaged beacon beside him. Many would be right. The answer surprised Serafina. She expected him to defend himself. Instead, he accepted criticism before explaining his reasoning. Kale continued. The galaxy is approaching a resource crisis. Several worlds have less than 50 years before major population instability. The archive contains predictive models from the first accord. Access could prevent billions of deaths. His argument was not emotional. It was mathematical. That made it harder to dismiss. Serafina looked toward the archive. And your solution is to control access. Kale did not deny it. Someone must make decisions quickly. The chamber remained silent. Ethan looked at the commander. Quick decisions can save lives. Kale nodded slightly. Then you understand. Sometimes. Ethan looked at the ancient systems around them. But sometimes they only make it easier to ignore the people who disappear from the equation. Kale's expression hardened. You believe emotions should govern civilization? No, Ethan shook his head. I believe civilizations fail when they pretend emotions are not part of reality. Serafina watched the exchange carefully. Neither side was completely wrong. That was what made the conflict dangerous. The Valkyrie Dominion believed stability required sacrifice. The Meridian Coalition believed survival required efficiency. Humanity believed survival required cooperation, even when cooperation was slower and more complicated. The archive displayed a new message. Multiple valid governance models detected. Evaluation continues. Kale looked at the words. The system is comparing us. Serafina nodded. Not our technology. Ethan added quietly. Our behavior. The commander stepped closer to the interface. And who decides the result? The question remained unanswered. Because the archive did not respond with authority. It responded with data. 3 civilizations. 3 approaches. 3 different answers to the same problem. A warning appeared. Power containment analysis. Pending. Serafina looked at the final category. It is not testing whether we deserve knowledge. Ethan looked at the ancient processor. No, then what? He watched the information move across the chamber. Whether we can receive it without becoming the reason it was hidden. The words settled over the room. The archive had not been protected because it was too valuable. It had been protected because value changed people. Outside, the coalition ships positioned themselves around the facility. Inside, 3 civilizations stood before the same unanswered question. Not who had the strongest argument. Not who had the greatest technology. But who could be trusted when the future itself became something they could control. The continuity archive did not show them a weapon. It showed them a memory. For several seconds, nobody in the chamber moved. The ancient processor had searched through 14 years of damaged records, military logs, and emergency transmissions before selecting a single event from humanity's lost expedition. Ethan Walker recognized the date before the image fully formed. His expression changed slightly. Not fear, not surprise, something closer to exhaustion. "You don't have to watch this," Serafina Vale said quietly. Ethan kept looking at the projection. "Yes, I do." The recording began. 14 years earlier. Ellis, 7. The same facility. The same underground corridors. But Ethan was different. Younger. Stronger. His armor had no damaged sections. His movements were faster. Around him stood the members of the Earth recovery team. Scientists. Engineers. Security personnel. Rescue specialists. People who had come to secure the archive and return home. The recording showed the moment everything changed. A structural failure had damaged the evacuation route. Hostile forces were approaching the surface. The mission commander issued an extraction order. All personnel were instructed to leave immediately. The operation was no longer considered recoverable. Ethan watched his younger self receive the order. Then another signal appeared. Civilian life signs. Several alien researchers trapped in the lower sections of the facility. The commander's voice echoed through the recording. "Walker, the window is closing. Fall back." The younger Ethan looked at the evacuation timer, then at the life signs. Serafina expected to see a heroic decision. Instead, she saw hesitation. Real hesitation. Ethan was afraid. He knew the numbers. He knew the risks. He knew people might not survive because of his choice. "What did you do?" Serafina asked softly. Ethan did not answer. The recording continued. His younger self turned around. Not because he believed he could save everyone. Because he believed leaving them was a decision he could not accept. The rescue operation began. Not like a battle. Like a disaster response. Ethan carried injured civilians through collapsing tunnels. He transferred oxygen supplies. He repaired damaged systems. He coordinated with people who did not even understand his language. Every action cost time. Every action reduced his chance of leaving. Then the final message appeared. Evacuation window closed. Extraction impossible. The recording ended with Ethan alone inside the facility. Waiting. Serafina looked at him. "You lost your team because you stayed." Ethan's eyes remained on the dark screen. Some of them. A pause. Some were already lost before I made the decision. The honesty was harder to hear than any excuse. "Do you regret it?" she asked. Ethan did not answer immediately. His hand moved toward the identification tag around his neck. A small piece of metal. Nothing valuable. Nothing powerful. Just a reminder. Every day. The answer surprised her. "Then why would you do it again?" Ethan looked at the archive. Because regretting something doesn't mean it was wrong. The chamber became silent. Serafina understood then. She had spent years believing conviction came from certainty. Ethan showed her something different. Sometimes conviction came from accepting that you might never know if you made the perfect decision. You simply chose the consequence you could live with. The archive processed the memory. New data integrated. Human behavioral pattern updated. Ethan looked at the message. "It still hasn't decided." Serafina looked at him. "Why does that bother you?" He gave a small, tired smile. "Because it shouldn't." She frowned. "Explain." Ethan looked around the chamber. If a machine decides humans are worthy because one person did something good, then it never understood humans. The word stopped her. He was not asking the archive to prove humanity was special. He was questioning the entire idea. The processor responded. Long-term pattern analysis required. The chamber displayed thousands of human historical records. Failures, conflicts, recoveries, mistakes followed by correction, progress followed by setbacks. Humanity was not presented as a perfect civilization. It was presented as an unfinished one. Kale Voss watched the data silently. "Your species is inconsistent." Ethan nodded. "Yes. That is supposed to be an advantage?" Ethan looked at him. No, a pause. "It is just the truth." The archive continued its calculation. It was not searching for a civilization that never made the wrong choice. Such a civilization did not exist. It was searching for something more difficult. A civilization capable of recognizing its failures before they became its identity. The archive did not continue the evaluation with a question. It continued with a simulation. The chamber around them changed. The walls disappeared into a field of light, and 3 possible futures unfolded across the ancient system. Serafina Vale watched entire civilizations rise and fall in seconds. Not predictions, not prophecies, probability models based on historical behavior. The First Accord had not built a machine that knew the future. It had built one that understood consequences. The first model belonged to the Valkyrie Dominion. The simulation showed a civilization that valued stability above all else. Decisions were made quickly. Threats were contained. Resources were distributed efficiently. Worlds survived. But the same pattern appeared repeatedly. Individual losses became acceptable. Entire populations became statistics. The system displayed the final calculation. High-order stability. Limited social adaptability. Serafina looked away. She understood the result too well. The second model belonged to the Meridian Coalition. The simulation showed centralized planning, rapid response, and precise allocation of resources. Fewer mistakes, faster recovery, higher efficiency. Then the system displayed the cost. Low individual autonomy. Dependence on central authority. Kale Voss watched silently. The archive was not insulting his civilization. It was showing the trade they had chosen. Efficiency had a price. Every advantage did. Finally, the third model appeared. Humanity. The simulation moved slower. Decisions took longer. Arguments lasted longer. Governments disagreed. Groups challenged each other. From the outside, it looked inefficient. Almost chaotic. Serafina expected the system to show failure. Instead, the data continued. Human civilization suffered repeated conflicts. Environmental disasters. Political instability. Social division. But after every collapse, another pattern appeared. Adaptation. Correction. Rebuilding. The system displayed the final analysis. High adaptive recovery. Variable social stability. Unknown long-term potential. Kale looked at Ethan. Your civilization is the least predictable. Ethan nodded. Yes. And you consider that an advantage? Ethan looked at the simulation. Not always. He paused. Sometimes it is a problem. The honesty made Kale quiet. Ethan did not defend humanity as perfect. He did not pretend human history was clean. He simply accepted the full picture. Serafina studied him. That was the difference she had been missing. The human was not proud of humanity's flaws. He was aware of them. The archive changed the simulation. A new scenario appeared. Resource collapse. Limited time. Insufficient supplies. Every civilization faced the same impossible decision. Save the majority immediately, or spend resources attempting to protect everyone. The Valkyrie model chose quickly. The coalition model calculated probability. Humanity's model delayed. Debate continued. Arguments formed. Plans changed. It was slower. Messier. Then the unexpected result appeared. Long-term survival probability increased. Not because humanity made better decisions every time. Because humanity allowed decisions to be challenged before becoming permanent. It is measuring correction, Serafina whispered. Ethan looked at her. Maybe. Not success. No, he watched the simulation continue. The ability to notice when success is becoming failure. The words remained in the chamber. Kale stepped toward the interface. You believe disagreement creates strength? Ethan shook his head. No, the commander looked at him. Then what? Ethan answered after a moment. I think disagreement creates a chance to find out if we're wrong. The archive processed the exchange. Social adaptability updated. The chamber lights dimmed. Then a new alert appeared. External crisis detected. Structural failure in lower facility. Time until system collapse, 18 minutes. Serafina immediately turned toward the exit. The archive is failing. Kale checked the readings. If the core collapses, every data structure could be lost. Ethan moved toward the damaged corridor. Serafina stopped him. Your injuries. He looked back. Still there. That was not what I meant. Ethan adjusted his damaged armor. I know. For a moment, nobody moved. The archive had presented them with theories. Now it presented them with reality. No simulation. No abstract choices. A real consequence. 3 civilizations. 3 philosophies. One problem. The chamber doors opened. Kale prepared his equipment. Serafina activated her armor systems. Ethan picked up the old evacuation beacon he had carried for 14 years. Not a weapon. Not a symbol. A reminder. The future was no longer a question of who deserved access to the archive. The question was whether they could prove the same thing the First Accord had spent thousands of years searching for. That intelligence was not measured by the ability to solve problems alone. It was measured by the willingness to solve them together. The collapse began 3 minutes earlier than the archive predicted. The ancient facility had survived thousands of years, but time had finally reached the systems hidden beneath Ellis 7. The floor shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. Emergency lights painted the chamber in red. The continuity archive displayed the remaining stability window. 18 minutes. Serafina Vale looked at the damaged readings. The lower sections are failing. Kale Voss moved toward the control interface. Then we stabilize the core before the archive is lost. Ethan Walker studied the data. His eyes moved across the failing systems. Power distribution, structural support, life support. 3 separate failures. 3 separate solutions. The core is not the only problem, he said. Kale looked at him. Explain. Ethan pointed at the display. The lower evacuation sectors are still active. Serafina checked the readings. He was right. Hidden beneath the facility were emergency shelters containing several alien researchers who had survived the original collapse. The same people Ethan had protected 14 years ago. How many, she asked. Ethan read the numbers. 32. Kale looked at the countdown. The core fails in 18 minutes. We do not have time for a secondary rescue. The words were not cruel. They were calculated. Serafina recognized that immediately. The commander was not choosing to abandon them because he did not care. He was making the same kind of decision she had once made. A decision based on probability. A decision that had always seemed necessary. We need the archive stabilized first, Kale continued. Then we can recover survivors. Ethan looked at him. If the lower sectors lose pressure, there will be no survivors to recover. The chamber became silent. The difference between them was not intelligence. It was priority. Kale believed survival required protecting the system. Ethan believed the system existed to protect lives. Serafina felt the old memory return. The civilian transport. The order to withdraw. The moment she chose the mission over the people waiting behind her. The same calculation. The same logic. The same excuse. I'll take the lower sectors, she said. Both men looked at her. Kale frowned. That is inefficient. Serafina activated her armor systems. Yes. She looked toward the collapsing corridor. But it is necessary. The answer surprised even herself. Not because it was emotional, because it was a decision she had once refused to make. Ethan watched her carefully. You know there may not be enough time. Serafina looked at him. I know. A pause. That does not make them acceptable losses. The words felt different when she said them. Years ago, she had heard them as weakness. Now she understood them as responsibility. The 3 of them moved. Kale and Ethan headed toward the central processor. Serafina descended into the lower evacuation sectors. The facility became a maze of failing systems and collapsing structures. She found the survivors trapped behind a damaged security door. They were frightened, confused, unable to understand why a Valkyrie warrior had come back for them. She did not give a speech. She did not explain. She simply opened the door. One by one, she guided them through the failing corridors. The process was slow. Too slow. Every second mattered. The old Serafina would have hated the inefficiency. The new Serafina understood the cost of efficiency without compassion. Above them, the archive monitored every action. Not because it valued sacrifice, because it measured priorities under pressure. At the central chamber, Ethan and Kale reached the damaged core. The system required 2 separate inputs to stabilize. Human engineering knowledge. Coalition power transfer technology. Neither could complete it alone. Kale looked at the interface. Your method is slower. Ethan connected the final circuit. Yes. And yet it works. Ethan looked at him. Usually. For the first time, Kale almost smiled. The chamber shook again. The countdown reached 5 minutes. Serafina returned with the survivors just as the final stabilization sequence began. She entered the chamber carrying the last injured researcher herself. Ethan looked at her. He did not say anything. He did not need to. The archive displayed a new message. Power containment analysis updated. Cooperative decision model confirmed. The system had not measured whether they could save everyone. No civilization could. It had measured something harder. What they chose to protect when time ran out. The collapse continued around them. But for the first time since arriving on Ellis 7, the 3 civilizations were no longer competing for the future. They were carrying it together. The continuity archive did not open like a gate. It unfolded like a decision. The ancient chamber became brighter as 3 authorization signals appeared across the central processor. Human, Valkyrie, Coalition, 3 different civilizations, 3 different histories, 3 different ways of understanding survival. Ethan Walker stood beside the interface, his damaged armor still connected to the emergency systems. Serafina Vale stood opposite him, watching the symbols move across the display. Kale Voss remained silent. For the first time since arriving at Ellis 7, the commander had no immediate solution. The archive had finished measuring their actions. Now it revealed the reason it had remained hidden. A recording from the first Accord appeared. Not a single species, not a single ruler. Hundreds of civilizations gathered together. We created the continuity archive after our greatest achievement became our greatest threat. The ancient message continued. We believed knowledge alone would protect us. We were wrong. Images appeared across the chamber. Advanced worlds, endless resources, technology beyond anything the current galaxy possessed. Then the failures. Civilizations that discovered limitless energy and used it to expand without control. Species that created perfect prediction systems and stopped allowing disagreement. Governments that solved every short-term crisis while slowly destroying their own adaptability. Intelligence allowed us to create power, the message said. Wisdom would have required us to understand its limits. Serafina watched the images carefully. The first Accord had not fallen because they lacked technology. They had fallen because they believed they were mature enough to control everything they created. The archive was not searching for a civilization without mistakes. It was searching for one that could recognize mistakes before they became irreversible. The recording ended. The chamber returned to silence. Kale looked at the interface. So the answer is humanity. Ethan immediately shook his head. No, both of them looked at him. No, Serafina asked. Ethan looked at the data surrounding them. Humanity is not the answer. He paused. We're evidence. The words carried no pride. No attempt to elevate his species above others. Only acceptance. The archive processed the statement. Human self-assessment. Consistent. Kale looked at Ethan. You are willing to admit your civilization is not superior. Ethan looked at him. Because it isn't. He touched the old identification tag around his neck. We have done terrible things. A pause. We're still trying to do better. The honesty affected Serafina more than any declaration could have. The Valkyrie Dominion had always valued confidence, strength, certainty. But Ethan represented something different. A civilization that carried its failures instead of hiding them. The archive displayed the final requirement. Access condition, shared responsibility. 3 interfaces activated. 1 for each civilization. Kale stepped forward first. He looked at the Coalition access point. For years, his people had believed central control was the only way to prevent disaster. Now the archive required him to share control with civilizations he did not fully trust. He placed his hand on the interface anyway. Serafina approached next. The Valkyrie symbol appeared beneath her hand. She remembered the transport, the decision she had made, the lives she had accepted losing. Her fingers remained still for several seconds. Then she activated the connection. Not because she had forgotten her past, because she had finally understood it. Ethan looked at the final interface. Serafina noticed his hesitation. What is it? He looked at the symbol of Earth. Nothing. She waited. He sighed quietly, just wondering if we deserve this. The answer surprised her. After everything he had done, after everything the archive had shown, he still questioned himself. You don't know? She asked. Ethan looked at the ancient system. I know what I want us to become. A pause. I'm not sure we're there yet. The archive activated. Energy moved through the facility. Across Ellis 7, ancient systems awakened. The storm above the planet began to break apart. The gate did not release a weapon. It did not reveal a power source. It released knowledge. Shared. Limited. Controlled. The galaxy had expected the First Accord's final legacy to be a tool for the strongest civilization. Instead, it was a reminder. Power was never the measure of a species. The measure was what they chose to do when they finally had enough of it. Serafina looked at Ethan standing beneath the light of the archive. A wounded human. A failed soldier. A person who had never claimed to be perfect. And that was exactly why the ancient system had listened. The first thing Ethan Walker noticed after the continuity archive awakened was how quiet the planet became. For 14 years, Ellis 7 had been a place of unfinished endings. Broken structures, abandoned equipment, signals that faded without answers. Now the ancient facility beneath the surface was alive again, not with the sound of conquest, but with the steady rhythm of systems designed to preserve knowledge. The archive had opened, but it had not given anyone ownership. That was the part every civilization had misunderstood. Weeks later, the first joint teams arrived on Ellis 7. Human engineers worked beside Valkyrie scientists. Meridian Coalition analysts shared resources with worlds they had once considered competitors. The process was slower than any empire would have preferred. Meetings lasted longer. Decisions required more voices. Arguments happened every day, but the archive remained stable. It was not searching for agreement. It was searching for cooperation. Serafina Vale stood near the restored evacuation beacon where she had first found Ethan. The device was still old, still patched, still carrying the same marks from 14 years of survival. "You kept that thing all this time," she said. Ethan looked at the beacon. "It worked. That is not the same as being worth keeping." He adjusted a damaged connector. "Sometimes it is." Serafina understood the answer. Ethan did not preserve things because they were perfect. He preserved them because they still had a purpose. The same reason he had stayed on Ellis 7. The same reason he had returned for people who had already been considered lost. Kale Voss approached them carrying a data tablet. The coalition commander looked different. Not softer, not less practical, just less certain that certainty was always strength. "The first resource models are complete," he said. "Several worlds have already requested access." Serafina looked at him. "And your recommendation?" Kale glanced toward the archive. "Controlled distribution." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Controlled by who?" Kale did not answer immediately. Months earlier, he would have given a number. A government. A council. A command structure. Now he looked at the ancient system and considered the question. "That," he finally said, "is what we are still trying to determine." It was a small change. But Serafina noticed. Real change rarely arrived as a declaration. It arrived as a person admitting they did not have the answer yet. Years passed. The archive became a place of exchange rather than possession. No civilization gained complete control. No species became the ruler of the galaxy. The First Accord's final creation did not create peace. It created something more difficult. A reason to keep trying. Ethan never became the symbol people wanted him to become. Historians attempted to describe him as a hero, but he always rejected the title. He returned to rescue operations. He trained new specialists. He repaired damaged systems on forgotten worlds. When people asked why he continued doing the same work after changing galactic history, his answer never changed. Because someone still needs help. Serafina heard that answer many times. She eventually understood why it mattered. Ethan was never important because he represented humanity at its best. He was important because he represented humanity honestly. A species that failed. A species that argued. A species that sometimes made the wrong choice. But also a species that could look at its own mistakes and decide they were not the end of the story. Near the old evacuation beacon on Ellis 7, a memorial was eventually built. It contained thousands of names from the original collapse. Human, Valkyrie, Coalition, every life that had mattered. Ethan's name was placed among them, not above them. He would have preferred it that way. Serafina visited the memorial years later. She placed her Valkyrie insignia beside the old human rescue marker. Two symbols from different civilizations. One shared meaning. Above them, the stars remained unchanged. Vast. Silent. Endless. The galaxy had spent centuries searching for a civilization powerful enough to inherit the future. It had searched among warriors, rulers, and conquerors. It never considered looking among those who understood one simple truth. The future was never meant to be owned. It was meant to be carried. And sometimes, the smallest act of compassion from the smallest world was enough to show an entire galaxy the way forward. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this journey among the stars. We would love to hear your thoughts and feelings about this story, so share them in the comments below. If you enjoyed this adventure, subscribe to Intergalactic Untold and join us for more unforgettable stories from across the universe.